Anyway, it was in the context of what appeared to be catastrophes. The Low Countries, France, falling within 6 weeks. The Germans now largely in control of the entire European continent. England isolated. That existentialism arises among a group of French writers. The most prominent is Jean-Paul Sartre, whose books are pictured here, and also Albert Camus, the author of a variety of novels and plays, as well as of philosophical works. Well, let's start talking about Sartre himself. What is existentialism exactly? He defines it as the thesis that existence precedes essence. The central problem we have is that of existence. Really, what does it mean? What is the meaning of life? You might say that's the basic philosophical question, the basic question of the existentialists. What is it all about? What is the meaning of life? And the themes that run through Sartre's work, and those of the other existentialists, are themes of absurdity and alienation. And so we're going to look at those as Sartre develops them and as also Camus develops them. But you can see them in lots of subsequent literature and art. Camus says the central philosophical problem is that of suicide. Does life have any meaning at all? And if it doesn't, what's the point of living? And so he casts this in very practical but also very dramatic personal terms. Now here's a traditional view about the meaning of life. This is Aristotle's view, but it's the view that really has been predominant throughout the Western tradition in one form or another. The view is that, look, human beings are naturally geared to seek happiness. That's our main goal. That's what really gives our lives meaning. Our excellence consists in fulfilling our function well. And so, what is our function? What are we for? We've talked about that. The answer is not just to strive for happiness, but rational activity. And so the meanings of our lives are to be caught up in pursuit of happiness by way of rational activity. That's what we're for. We're beings who can plan, who can think rationally, and who can actually seek and pursue happiness as a result. Well, that's the general idea that we inherit from the Western philosophical tradition. But Sartre says, no, existence precedes essence. In other words, we don't have any intrinsic essence. We don't have any intrinsic function. There is nothing like seeking virtue or seeking happiness or rational activity that could constitute what we are for. What is a human being for? Well, the world doesn't determine any answer to that. Life doesn't have any intrinsic meaning. And so if you ask a traditional philosopher of this sort, what's the meaning of life? They'll say, well, to pursue happiness by rational means. But Sartre says, no, there's no answer I can give you like that. There's nothing that is intrinsic to being human that determines any purpose to human life, any essence. In fact, that's in a way depressing. What's the meaning of life? Well, it doesn't really have any intrinsic meaning at all. But it opens the field for us to define our lives and their meanings however we want. And so we're free to define ourselves and the meanings of our lives. We are free to choose anything. And so Sartre says human beings are radically free. In fact, if there's anything that is really essential to us in Sartre, it is precisely that radical freedom. What's essential to us is not having an essence, actually having that kind of field of possibilities open for us so that we can define ourselves and we can define the meanings of our lives however we choose. Now, not everything is like that. He says, look, he draws a distinction between being in itself and being for itself. Being in itself, he also calls facticity. It's basically a third-person view of things. Ordinary objects are like this chair. Can this chair define the meaning of its own existence? Can the chair say, oh, it is so difficult being a chair, but it is up to me to decide what kind of chair I will be. No, the chair, it doesn't have any, well, it does have a sort of meaning, but we give it that meaning. It's something to be sat in. And actually, it's an awesome chair. This is just like the one in the Big Bang Theory that's in Leonard and Sheldon's living room. And they're the best possible chairs. They're fantastic. If you ever get a chance to get one, get one. I tried to convince my wife we should buy chairs like this. The university was getting rid of a bunch of them. I said, we should buy them. But you had to buy them in lots of 90. So what are we going to do with 90 chairs? And they're really heavy, too. So like 90 super heavy chairs. But they're fantastic. Anyway, that aside, all of that is not something that's up to the chair, right? It's up to me. I say it's a chair, and other people say it's a chair. I sit in it, I say, oh, it's an excellent chair. I define its excellence. And none of that is up to the chair. And so the poor chair can't really determine anything about its environment, its purpose, anything else. But we are different from that. We can actually take a first-person view. We exist for ourselves. We are capable of defining the meaning of our own existence in a way that the chair can't. We are, as Charles Taylor puts it, self-interpreting animals. And it's that ability to interpret our own lives for ourselves that makes us different from other animals, that makes us different from inanimate objects. We are not just beings whose meaning is defined by something else. We are capable of defining our own meaning and interpreting our own lives. Well, his view then is in general like that of Martin Heidegger, who preceded him, and it was something of a proto-existentialist, you might say. There's Heidegger, pictured here. He was a highly innovative thinker, but also someone who wrote a very long work called Being in Time. He also, which is, by the way, a great but flawed work. It is worth your time to actually try to work your way through it. However, Heidegger himself ended up joining the Nazi Party and took what is called the turn in his philosophy that sent him off in a very different direction, and a direction that doesn't have much to do with existentialism. But the existentialist, or proto-existentialist Heidegger, had a view like this, which Sartre takes over. I give my life meaning through projects I select. So I define the meaning of my life by doing things. For example, right now, you choose to go to college, and part of the meaning of at least this part of your life is defined in terms of that project that you've selected. You take that on. It wasn't given you, it wasn't forced on you, it's something you choose to do. And in general, that's how we give our lives meaning. We choose to engage in various projects. We decide, I'm going to do this, I'm going to aim at that goal. I'm going to try to become a good tennis player, or a good musician, or a good philosopher, or I'm going to try to get a degree in engineering, or whatever it happens to be. Now, Heidegger did stress that it's not complete and absolute freedom. The range of my choices is not up to me. This is a theme we've also seen in Ortega y Gasset. And so Heidegger says, look, I am bound to feel in some sense alienated from the world. Why? Because I am thrown into it. He has this concept of thrownness, which is to say a lot of things about my life I don't control. I am not in charge of. So yes, I am capable of choosing a variety of projects, but as Ortega stressed, that's not an absolute unlimited choice. My choices are bounded by my own time and place. Moreover, my own character is defined by my own time and place. And so in a lot of ways, my life is bounded by these things that have to do with being in itself that I can't control. I'm not like the chair in that I am capable of interpreting my own life, but I'm not in control of all aspects of it. Some parts are simply given to me. And Heidegger thinks because I've been thrown into the world, I didn't ask to be here, I didn't decide upon the circumstances or the time of my birth, in the end I inevitably feel alienated from those parts of my life I don't control. Now, is that sense of alienation inevitable? Are you bound to feel alienated from the parts of your life that you don't control? What are some examples of things that are aspects of your life you're not in control of? You were just thrown into the world, you couldn't control. Yeah?
If you were born into royalty.
Good, you're born into royalty. That would be something that actually characterizes you, and you didn't ask to be. It's not like, God came up to you before you were born, and sort of disembodied soul, and said, so what kind of life would you like to lead? You say, oh, I want to be a king. It's good to be the king. And, it's not like that. You're just thrown into that. You didn't have a choice. Yes?
Well, to follow up with that, who your parents are and geographical location.
Good, exactly. Who your parents are, who your family is, where you were born, when you were born. All of those things were not under your control. You didn't have a choice about whether to be born an ancient Roman or a contemporary Texan, let's say. You didn't have a choice about whether to be born as a man or a woman, or to be born into a wealthy family or to a poor family, or to be born with those particular parents. All of those were things outside of your control. Now, in my own case, well, yeah, I was born at a certain place and time. There's more or less the place. This is actually where I got my PhD, and it was a mile from where I was born. That's sort of the neighborhood. That's the house I grew up in and all of that. This was one of the defining moments of my childhood. And if you don't know what moment that is, I have nothing to say to you. That's Bill Mazeroski hitting a home run that wins the 1960 World Series. And then, there are all sorts of aspects of my family. Here's my family on my mother's side. There is my wife and daughters there, but otherwise I didn't pick those people. And the same thing is true of my family on my father's side. I mean, those people were just sort of given to me. And so Well, I mean, not to me in particular, but you know what I mean. I mean, you're not in control of who's in your own family. And so, in the end, what do you say about all of this? Well, Heidegger thinks you're inevitably alienated from these aspects of things. You realize that wasn't under your control. But now, why should you feel alienated from it? Part of the reason I've shown you my hometown and my family is to say, look, I don't actually feel alienated from all that. One way of reacting to it is to say, oh, no, I didn't choose any of this. What am I doing here? But another reaction is to embrace that. And so, yeah, what controls whether you reject your own surroundings and feel alienated from them, or whether you embrace them? I mean, I will say, I think adolescence is a time when people often feel alienated and are sort of thinking, yeah, what about what was given to me? What aspects of this thrownness am I willing to embrace and which ones do I reject? And so it's natural to go through a period of feeling alienated, but it's not as if Sartre or Heidegger are talking about adolescence here. They're talking about human life in general. They think you'll inevitably feel alienated from your surroundings for this sort of reason. Is it inevitable? Yeah.
I think part of it goes on kind of what social contract you're privy to. Like if you go along with the social contract that's against your body, but if you go into that, you're going to feel alienated because it's going to be that.
Ooh, all right, good. That's interesting. Yeah, it may depend what kind of social contract you're willing to accept. And here, let's say not in a big sense of what form of government do you want, but really in the sense of, yeah, is this community whose norms, whose values you're willing to embrace or not? And so you might say there's something about this that in the end I choose. I choose to stay in this community and be a part of it, or maybe you choose to reject it. In short, that a questioning of this is natural. That a time of saying, wait, these things were simply thrown at me, given to me without my consent and control. Do I embrace them? Do I control them? Or do I control them? Do I, control it by, in the sense, yeah, choosing to remain as part of this community, or do I reject that community and choose something else? And so you might say, look, the choice is inevitable. That you go in one direction as opposed to another doesn't seem inevitable. Now, what Sartre is really willing to stress here, however, is not this question of alienation or thrownness, but rather authenticity in whatever your response happens to be. You may embrace it, you may reject it. Whatever you do, however, he wants you to do it authentically. And so his main value, like Nietzsche's, is authenticity. He says, sometimes I do things because there's some external authority telling me to do it. I might perform an act because it's just what everybody does. Nobody's specifically telling me to do it, I just sense that's what you do in this circumstance. But he says, I may also do it because I choose to do it. Not just because it's what everybody's doing, not because somebody else told me to do it, but because I choose to do it. That's to act authentically. That's what authenticity is, to actually choose and embrace your choice. Well, another main theme in all the existentialists is the absurd. We've confronted that a little bit in Pirandello, who might be considered a forerunner of the existentialists. In this respect, sometimes, according to Sartre and Camus, we're forced to confront the meaninglessness of existence. And why do we exist? The existentialist chicken asks, well, I can't speak for you, but I'm here for the margaritas, says the other. In any event, sometimes we're forced to confront the fact that existence is meaningless. Claire suddenly realized that existence precedes essence, and she was free to kill all the old gods. Or Henri, oh, the cat. If you've not seen any of the videos of Henri, the existentialist cat, I urge you to watch them. They're really very funny, and they give you the sense of what existentialism is all about. I primed one of these so you can watch. Oh, I don't have the sound set up, and I'm too far away. Do it yourself. Click on that link anyway. It's really very awesome. And we'll give you the feeling of what existentialism is really all about. In any case, yes, I mean, the video I have linked there is one where he goes to the event. Just, they take me to the event. I hate it. It is pointless. He will look at me, do various things to me, and say, I am okay. There is nothing wrong with you. What is the point of anything? What is the point of my existence? Etc., etc. Well, anyway. That's the idea. Sometimes, as Pirandello would put it, the mask slips. At some point, we confront the absurd. We seek meaning in something and we cannot find it. We realize, as Sartre puts it somewhat paradoxically, we're not what we are and we are what we are not. Why? Well, we are being for itself. We have to define the meanings of our own existence. And so we are not simply the things that we already are. The chair is what it is, but we aren't. We go beyond what we are. We are partly defined by what we can become, what we choose to become. And so the future is essential to us in a way that it's not essential to other inanimate objects. So, yeah. What is the opposite of authenticity? It is bad faith. And much of Sartre's discussion about ethics is really about bad faith and ways of avoiding it. The first act of bad faith, he says, is to flee what it, that is to say, being for itself, cannot flee. To flee what it is. And so there are times when we don't embrace what we are, when we flee from what we are, and don't embrace in particular the freedom of our choice. So I might not embrace what I am. I might not embrace my own freedom and realize that I'm free to choose. I may not be embracing my own choice as I make it. So he says, if bad faith is possible, it is because it's an immediate, permanent threat to every project of the human being. It is because consciousness conceals in its being a permanent risk of bad faith. The origin of the risk is the fact that the nature of consciousness simultaneously is to be what it is not and not to be what it is. Why? Because we're constantly thinking of the future. We are not defined by what we already are. We are defined in part by what we are not yet. Now, freedom is in a way a wonderful thing, but freedom is also scary. Think back to Dostoevsky, the Grand Inquisitor, saying people don't want to be free. Why? Because freedom entails responsibility, and people don't want the responsibility. They just want to be told what to do. They just want to be taken care of. And Sartre says, well, a lot of people are like that. That's precisely what bad faith is. It's to want to turn over the decisions you have to make about your life to someone else, and to fail to recognize they're really your choices. So authenticity consists in recognizing your own freedom and choosing to exercise it. Trying to avoid your own freedom, that's bad faith. In effect, the Grand Inquisitor is saying everybody has bad faith. And Sartre would say, not everybody. Lots of people do, but you can make the choice to embrace your own freedom. Each person is an absolute choice of self. You are condemned to be free. Why condemned? Well, because it puts the entire weight of your own world on your shoulders. Are you living a happy life, the life you want or not? In the end, the responsibility is yours. It is your choice. You might say, it's my family's fault, it's the fault of my circumstances, it's the fault of society, blah, blah, blah. And he said, no, it's not. In the end, it's your fault. If your life isn't what you want it to be, then it's because you're not making the right choices. Take responsibility for your own life. And so he says, look, if you're condemned to be free, the weight of the world is on your shoulders. You're responsible for the world, and you're responsible for yourself as a way of being. The responsibility in the end is yours. He says, what happens to me happens through me, and I can neither affect myself with it, nor revolt against it, nor resign myself to it. Everything that happens to me is mine. And he even talks about the war. He says, look, I'm writing this in the midst of World War II. Is that mine? Was I responsible for the war? And he says, well, insofar as it affects me, actually, yes. I could flee. I could kill myself and not face the war. I am choosing to live in France during the war because I didn't make the choice to commit suicide. Because I didn't make the choice to flee. The fact that the war is happening to me is in part my choice. Now, did I start the war? No, of course not. But the fact that the war is affecting me, that is my choice. I could get out of here. And so, in short, he says, everything that happens to me is really, in the end, mine if I let it happen to me. There are no accidents of life. If something happens to me, I have chosen it. Well, yes, the Sartre cookbook, free will soup. Fill a pot with water, add anything you want, or add nothing, or pour the water out. It's all up to you. Okay. Well, I haven't said much about Camus, and I'll just say a few things very quickly. He's an Algerian-born French writer who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1957, the second youngest person to ever win it. The youngest was Kipling. He's also the first African-born writer ever to win. Here you see some photographs of him. Very dramatic, handsome-looking character. Anyway, he started out as a communist, but got thrown out of the Communist Party for having unorthodox ideas. Then he became a pacifist until the Germans invaded France and began executing people. And he joined the French resistance at that point. All of that can make him look vacillating, but in a way, Camus is somebody I respect because he changed his mind when circumstances changed. He learned from experience in a way that a lot of people never do. In any event, He said we inevitably confront the absurd in various experiences. When we find ourselves weary with the routine and say, why am I doing this? What does it all mean? When we see something out of context, if you just repeat one word over and over again, authenticity, 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 it starts losing meaning. It's starting seeming absurd. You see somebody who you can't hear, watch television with the sound off. I once watched Saturday Night Fever with the sound off. It has a very different character. It seems absurd. It seems even worse with the sound on. And also thinking of ourselves as unable to act or understand. His goal is to live without appeal. He says, in the end, we have to create our own meaning. There's nothing else we can appeal to. And so as Sartre says, we have to take responsibility. I can't appeal to something else to justify my life and my choices. In the end, I have to recognize it's my life. It's my choices. The way I live is up to me, and I have to live without appeal. I can't say, I'm doing this because the government wants me to, or those people want me to, or it's the way things are done around here, or God wants me to even. He says, in the end, I choose it. I create my own meaning. There's no outside authority I can appeal to. I have to embrace this myself.